I am currently 18 years old and living in New York. The story happened when I was 16. The year I thought I was addicted to the game PUBG PC, and I played it a lot. Although I had my own PC set up at home, the feeling of sitting with my friends at internet cafes and calling team directly was still something that brought a certain excitement. Anyway, back then, I had a lot of time for myself, because my parents' jobs required them to frequently travel for work, and I was often home alone. This happened on a Saturday evening when, once again, my parents were away. They left me at home with a certain amount of cash. But whenever I went shopping, I had to take pictures of the receipts to ensure that I wasn't pocketing any of the money they gave me. That day, after school, I quickly stopped by the local grocery store and bought some food for the few days my parents would be gone. That evening, after finishing all the homework I needed to do, I made plans with a few friends to meet at an internet cafe and play PUBG together. Normally, if my parents were home, I would rarely be allowed to go out this late at night, so I decided to break the rules a little this time. 10 minutes later, we were at the internet cafe. We had promised each other that we would keep playing PUBG until we reached the highest rank before calling it quits. After about 3 hours of non-stop gaming, it was already midnight, and since we were pretty tired, Cole and Larry decided to head home early. That left just me and Henry at the cafe, so we decided to switch things up and play a solo match of FIFA together. About 2 hours later, I started feeling pretty hungry, so I decided to take a little break and grab something to eat before heading home. After a short break, Henry and I decided to go to the convenience store nearby to buy some snacks. The internet cafe was still lit up, with only a few people still engrossed in their games. Henry and I stopped by the convenience store, grabbed a couple of sodas and a sandwich. Standing at the cashier, I didn't forget my usual habit, taking a picture of the receipt to avoid any trouble with my parents later. Returning to the internet cafe, the two of us sat down and continued chatting about the previous games, discussing those clutch moments when it seemed like we were about to lose, but managed to make an incredible comeback. Henry, always easygoing and playful, kept the atmosphere light and fun between us. After finishing our food, I felt more alert, and we dove right back into another solo FIFA match. The mantras went on and on until I finally glanced at the clock and saw that it was already 3 a.m. by then. I could feel the exhaustion hitting me hard. Henry also looked drained, no longer as energetic as before, so we decided to call it a night and head home. As I stepped out of the internet cafe, the cold night air hit my face. The streets were empty, with only the dim glow of the streetlights casting long shadows on the road. Henry and I parted ways at the intersection, and I began my walk home. The distance wasn't far, just about a 10-minute walk, but that night, as I passed through the quiet alleys, an eerie feeling crept over me. It felt as if someone was watching me from behind. I stopped and looked around. There was no one. Maybe it was just my exhaustion playing tricks on me. I continued walking, but that strange feeling didn't go away. I tried to calm myself down, convincing myself that it was just the fatigue from a long night of gaming that was making me feel this way. However, each step felt heavier, and the faint sound behind me sent chills down my spine. I decided to stop again, turning around to look carefully behind me. Still, no one was there. The empty street was eerily quiet, almost too silent for comfort. I turned into the alley near my house, and everything was pitch dark, with only a faint light in the distance. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder. By now, I was certain someone was following me. My heart raced, and my hands and legs began to tremble. Unable to stay calm any longer, I picked up speed and started running as fast as I could. just a few hundred meters from my house, I suddenly heard a faint voice call from behind. "Hey." The voice was strange soft, yet somehow chilling. I didn't dare look back. Instead, I ran even faster, sprinting through the narrow alley that led to my home. As soon as I stepped into the yard, I fumbled for my keys with trembling hands, trying desperately to fit the key into the lock. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Finally, the door clicked open and I rushed inside, slamming it shut and locking it securely. My heart was pounding in my chest, and cold sweat dripped down my back. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. But then, once again, I heard footsteps, right outside, very close. I tried to stay as quiet as possible, listening intently. The footsteps stopped right in front of the door, but when I peeked through the small gap in the curtains, all I saw was darkness and the faint glow of a distant street lamp. No one was standing outside. Maybe I was just too exhausted after a long night of gaming. After that, I went into my bedroom and got ready to sleep. About 15 minutes after drifting off, I was jolted awake by a strange noise coming from downstairs. I clearly remembered that I was home alone, so there was no way anyone else could be inside. Feeling a surge of adrenaline, I decided to go check it out. Grabbing the baseball bat I kept by my bed, I slowly made my way downstairs, every crick of the floorboard heightening my sense of dread. Step by step, I descended the stairs, gripping the baseball bat tightly. As soon as I reached the bottom, I froze in shock and let out a terrified yell. A strange man was sitting on the couch in my living room, casually watching TV. His eyes locked on me with a disturbing grin on his face. Panic surged through me, and I charged toward him, screaming, "What are you doing here?" The man immediately jumped up and bolted toward the front door, and I ran after him, the baseball bat raised in my hands. "How did you get in here?" I shouted, chasing him. He didn't answer, he just ran straight out the front door and disappeared into the darkness. It was only after he was gone that I realized something crucial. I had forgotten to remove the key from the lock after rushing inside earlier. A wave of embarrassment and fear washed over me. I had nearly paid a heavy price for that mistake. I didn't tell my parents about what had happened. Instead, I quietly checked around the house to see if anything was missing. Thankfully, everything was still in place. Nothing had been stolen. But I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I had no idea what that man's intentions were, and I kept thinking if I hadn't woken up when I did, who knows what could have happened to me. The thought sent chills down my spine. When I was in middle school, I really didn't know how to talk to girls. This probably wasn't much different from other boys my age. Though I wasn't shy, I had friends, and my life was fairly normal. However, the idea of kissing or doing anything romantic with a girl was completely foreign to me. Meanwhile, a few of my friends had already started boasting that they had gone further with girls, and this made me feel pressured. Still, I couldn't figure out how to get closer to girls. Everything changed within a short period when teasing girls suddenly turned into a special interest in them. I was quite an active gamer during middle school and the early years of high school. When I was in 9th grade, around 14 years old in 2015, my voice was probably still a bit youthful. I played a lot of console and PC games at that time. My favorite console games were GTA 5 and Fallout 4, while my go-to PC game was none other than League of Legends. League of Legends had been around for a while, and my older brother was an expert at it. I couldn't let him outshine me, so I worked hard to improve my skills every day. For a kid like me at the time, playing online games was one of the best ways to escape the pressures of school and the real world. I spent hours every day immersed in these virtual worlds. During that time, I met a player named Medusa. She was always a higher level than me, and was better than most of the people I had encountered in the game. At first, we were just teammates, but as time passed, we became pretty close friends. Whenever I logged in, Medusa would message me right away. We'd team up, take down monsters, share experience points, and chat for hours on end. Medusa wasn't just a great gaming partner. She was someone I felt comfortable confiding in. She knew a lot about me my age, the town I lived in, and even small details about my family. In return, she opened up about her own life, and we shared a lot with each other. She revealed that her real name was Teresa, which made me trust her even more. Our relationship felt like a pen pal friendship, except we messaged through the game, and sometimes via an app on my iPod Touch. What made it even more interesting was that Teresa also lived in New York, just about an hour's drive away from me. Knowing that, I began to think about the possibility of meeting her in real life. After a few weeks of chatting, we started discussing the idea of meeting up. Since I didn't have a cell phone at the time, we exchanged contact information through the messaging app. I sent her a somewhat awkward selfie, trying my best to look cool. When Teresa received it, she told me I looked cute, which made me really happy. She also sent a photo of herself. Teresa looked older than me, about 15, just like she had mentioned before. She was really beautiful, which only made me more eager to meet her in person. Our messages started getting a bit more flirty and romantic after that. But of course, since we were still minors, neither of us could drive to meet each other. Teresa, however, came up with a solution. She mentioned that her sister had friends who lived near my area, and she could catch a ride with them to come see me. For a 13-year-old like me, this was an exciting and entirely new experience. I decided to plan our meet for the weekend when my parents would be out of town. They had a trip planned to Hampton for the weekend, which meant it would just be me and my 18-year-old brother at home. Since my brother usually went out with friends in the evening, I asked him to go out that night so I could have the house to myself. He agreed, and I felt like everything was perfectly arranged. That Saturday night, I was nervous the entire day. I cleaned my room, focused on my appearance, and even rehearsed in front of the mirror to make sure I wouldn't feel awkward when meeting Teresa. When I got the message from her saying she had arrived, I jumped up and ran to the door. But when I looked through the peephole, there was no one there. My anxiety started to build. I texted Teresa back, asking if she might have gone to the wrong house. She replied that she might have, and would try to find the correct one. I sat back on the sofa, holding my iPod, trying to calm the growing anxiety inside me. Just a few moments later, I received another message from her saying she had arrived again. I asked her to ring the doorbell so I'd know for sure. When the doorbell finally rang, my heart pounded in my chest, but as I looked through the peephole again, there was no one there. Then, out of nowhere, a hand appeared right in front of my eyes, tapping lightly on the door. A chill ran down my spine as I saw a bold, short man, who looked incredibly terrifying, come into view through the peephole. He said, "Joey, I'm Medusa. I want to talk to you." My entire body froze, too shocked to speak. Without hesitation, I ran away from the door and locked myself in my bedroom. I realized that the person I had been chatting with all this time wasn't a teenage girl, but a grown man. He kept messaging me, knocking on my window, and insisting we had a special connection. I was in such a state of panic that I couldn't bring myself to respond. Even though I had the landline phone in my hand, I was too embarrassed to call my parents for help. I finally called my brother. He picked up, and after I'd explained everything, he said he would come home right away with some friends. While I waited, I hid in my parents' room and watched through the window. The man was still outside, trying to peer in, tapping on the glass, and telling me we could still be good friends. But I didn't respond. When my brother arrived with his 3 friends, they quickly confronted the strange man. He awkwardly tried to justify his actions by saying that he was only trying to teach me a life lesson about not trusting strangers online. But no one believed him. My brother and his friends threatened him, and he hurried back to his car. One of my brother's friends even threw a rock at his car, making him speed off quickly. Although the experience was both terrifying and humiliating, I am truly grateful for my brother and his friends arriving just in time. They may have saved me from a genuinely dangerous situation. Looking back, I realized how easily trusting a stranger online could lead to serious consequences. It was the first big lesson in being cautious, one that I will never forget. In November 2020, a month that wasn't particularly special but marked the beginning of colder weather, I heard about a new game called Nightfall from some friends in my gaming group. Nightfall was a survival horror game where you were trapped in an abandoned town, surrounded by nothing but darkness and terrifying creatures lurking in the shadows. The goal was to survive the long, dreadful nights and find a way to escape. At first, I wasn't very interested in horror games, but after hearing so much hype about it, I decided to give it a shot. I remember that night vividly. The house was eerily quiet, as my parents were away on a work trip, and my brother was busy with university and hadn't come home. That meant I had the entire place to myself, with no one to disturb me. My room, located on the 2nd floor with a small window overlooking the backyard, was always my favorite spot for gaming at night. Around 9 p.m., I turned on my computer and started downloading Nightfall. With my headphones on, the sounds of the game were so clear and immersive that every little noise made me shiver. As the game began, I guided my character through the desolate streets of the abandoned town. Darkness engulfed everything, with the only source of light coming from the handheld flashlight the character used. The atmosphere was incredibly gloomy and tense, making me stay on high alert. At first, everything seemed normal, and I felt fairly comfortable exploring and getting the hang of the game mechanics. But after about an hour of playing, I started noticing strange things. At one point, as I was running down a narrow street, a shadow flickered across the screen. At first, I assumed it was just one of the monsters in the game, but something felt off. The shadow moved too quickly, and it didn't resemble any of the creatures I had encountered so far. It seemed as though it was watching me from a distance. I tried to ignore it, assuming it was just a graphical glitch. But as I ventured deeper into the game, that shadow reappeared this time, much clearer. It was standing right behind my character, looming in the darkness. Yet, whenever I quickly turned the camera to get a better look, it vanished, as if it had never been there. It felt like the shadow was toying with me, playing a twisted game of cat and mouse. That unsettling feeling crept in, and I no longer felt at ease in the game. I started feeling anxious. Even though I knew I was playing a horror game, this feeling was different. It felt more real. I paused the game, took off my headphones, and glanced around my room. Everything was quiet, with only the faint sound of the wind blowing through the window. Nothing unusual. I reassured myself that it was all just in my head, likely a trick of the atmosphere, and decided to keep playing. Around midnight, as I was guiding my character through the dark alleys, a stranger's message sent to me from Discord. I don't know who he is. Message whose content is, "I know what you're doing, kid. Do you think you can escape?" I was really panicked and didn't know what to do. That couldn't be part of the game, and I didn't have any chat windows open. I tried to ignore it and kept playing, But a few minutes later, another message appeared, longer this time. I'm getting closer. Get ready. I started to panic. Why does he know what I'm doing? I took off my headphones, feeling a chill run down my spine, and looked around the room again. I was sure no one could have sent those messages, since I was completely alone in the house. But the anxiety wouldn't go away. I decided to quit the game, not wanting to continue. Just as I moved my hand to close it, the screen suddenly went pitch black. Only one line of text appeared on the dark screen. I'm standing right behind you. I froze completely. This couldn't be real. Slowly, I turned around to look behind me. My room was still dark, and there was no one there. Yet, the unnerving feeling that someone was watching me lingered, like an invisible presence observing my every move. I tried to calm myself down, deciding to shut off my computer for good. Just as I reached for the power button, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. You shouldn't go back to the game. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My heart pounded, and my mind raced with a flood of thoughts. Who could have sent that message? How could they possibly know I had just quit the game? Panic started to take over, and all I wanted in that moment was to get out of my room. I rushed downstairs, locking the living room door behind me. I collapsed onto the sofa, breathing heavily, trying to calm myself down. I couldn't explain what had just happened. That entire night, I didn't dare go back to my room, and I certainly didn't touch my computer again. The next morning, I made the decision to uninstall Nightfall from my system. I didn't know what had really transpired, but I was sure of one thing. There was something very wrong with that game. While it was just a horror game, the feeling it left behind went far beyond simple entertainment. It wasn't just the in-game scares. It was the true sense of terror that had engulfed me, as if the boundary between reality and the virtual world had been shattered. After uninstalling Nightfall, I didn't receive any more strange messages, but the unease lingered. From that day on, I couldn't sit in front of my computer without feeling unsettled. Horror games, once a fun escape, no longer felt the same. Nightfall may have been just a game, but it left a deep, unforgettable mark on me of fear I couldn't shake. Since then, I've sworn off survival horror games. The experiences may be virtual, but the fear they create feels terrifyingly real. On a cold December night, I decided to spend the evening gaming, one of my favorite ways to unwind. Especially since I had set up an ideal gaming corner in my bedroom at the apartment where I lived. The room was small, but it was just enough to create a cozy nook with my computer, a large monitor, and high-quality headphones. My gaming setup was positioned in one corner of the room, right across from my bed, providing a private and quiet space to enjoy late-night gaming sessions. That night, I played Phantom Pursuit, a new horror game I had downloaded a few days earlier. In the game, you take on the role of a detective trying to solve a series of mysterious disappearances in a desolate town. But what you're up against isn't just the eerie atmosphere of the town, it's also strange entities lurking in the darkness. Unlike other horror games, Phantom Pursuit didn't just rely on a terrifying environment. It also used psychological elements, making the player feel as though they were being watched in their own room. At that moment, I was playing the game with my close friend Jack. We logged in around 7 p.m., with Jack playing from his apartment a few blocks away. Everything was going smoothly, just the usual mix of laughs and tense moments as we tried to escape the terrifying entities in the game. But things took a strange turn when we reached a scene where our characters had to confront an invisible entity that crept up from behind. I heard a faint tapping on the window behind me. At that moment, I had my headphones on, so the outside sounds were somewhat muffled, but the knocking was loud enough to grab my attention. I turned around to look toward the window, which was about 10 feet from where I was sitting. There, standing in the backyard just outside the glass, was a figure. The person stood motionless in the dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of my computer screen reflecting off the window. My heart skipped a beat. I immediately paused the game and told Jack, "Hey, there's someone outside my window." Jack didn't believe me. He thought I was just messing with him. "Come on, don't scare me, especially while we're playing a horror game," he said, laughing nervously. "No, seriously." "I'll be right back," I said, standing up and trying to stay calm as I walked toward the window. As I got closer, the man outside turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I quickly looked out the window, but there was nothing, just the small patch of grass and the fence separating my yard from the neighboring property. At that moment, I felt uneasy, but convinced myself that maybe it was just someone who got lost or had nothing to do with me. I returned to my chair and resumed talking with Jack. I told Jack about what had just happened, but we both brushed it off, assuming it was just some kind of misunderstanding. We continued playing for a few more hours without incident. However, around 10 p.m., as I was fully engrossed in guiding my character through the game, I heard another sound at the window. This time, I was sure of it, and I immediately turned to look. Through the window, I saw the same man from earlier, but this time, he was standing still, looking directly at me. My heart pounded in my chest. This couldn't be happening. I tried to stay calm as I slowly stood up. The moment I did, the man quietly stepped back and disappeared from my sight once again. Panic surged through me, and I rushed out of the room, into the hallway of my apartment, feeling an overwhelming need to distance myself from that window. As I stood there, catching my breath, I suddenly heard louder bangs coming from the bedroom window, as if the man was trying to break the glass. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I quickly left the apartment, stepping into the shared hallway of the building, and immediately called the police. While waiting for them to arrive, I didn't dare go back inside. Instead, I headed down to the lobby area of the building and sat there, still shaken. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't stop thinking about that man. Who was he? What did he want? All I knew was that I had to get away from him. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived. They inspected my apartment and the area behind the building. When I returned to my apartment, they informed me that the bedroom window had indeed been broken. There were clear signs that the man had entered and rummaged through my belongings. Some of my things were scattered around, and a few small electronic devices were missing. But what shocked me the most was when the police pointed out footprints leading from the broken window straight to my desk right where I had been playing my game just minutes earlier. After their investigation, the police confirmed that the intruder had escaped before they arrived. I was still trembling as I recalled the events of that night. The most unsettling part was that the police couldn't explain why the man had fixated on my window, or how he seemed to know my every move. It left me with more questions than answers, and the eerie feeling that someone had been watching me so closely haunted me long after they left. I decided not to stay at the apartment that night. I packed a few things and went over to Jack's place to spend the night. We stayed up talking about the whole situation, but I couldn't shake the strange connection between Phantom Pursuit and what had happened to me. In the game, the character is stalked by an invisible entity from hidden corners, and in real life, I felt like I was being watched in a similar, unsettling way. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but that chilling feeling stayed with me, making me think that something was off. The next day, I decided to uninstall Phantom Pursuit from my computer. The window in my apartment was fixed, and I tried to get back to my normal routine, but the memory of that night stuck with me. Ever since, I've felt like there's an invisible presence watching me, even when I'm gaming in what used to feel like my safest space. The game might have been virtual, but the fear I felt that night was all too real. Ever since then, whenever I put on my headphones to play a game, I always pause for a moment, listening carefully just to make sure nothing in the real world is lurking around me. A while ago, I joined the online gaming community as a way to relax after work. I wasn't aiming to be a professional player or a well-known streamer. I would stream on Twitch, mostly for friends, and sometimes a few random viewers would drop by. Each stream usually had between 1 to 4 viewers, and most of them were people I knew. For me, it was just a hobby. I didn't do it for fame or to make money. One night, I decided to try a game that had been getting a lot of buzz. The Haunting. It's a horror game that places you in a haunted house, where you have to survive the mysterious entities lurking within. What makes the game so haunting is the eerie atmosphere. Doors creak open by themselves. Footsteps echo down dark hallways, and you can feel the invisible presence of something watching you. It really got under my skin. I started the stream like I always did, with a few friends watching. The night was pretty quiet until a new viewer joined the channel. The username wasn't familiar to me, so I figured it was just a random person who happened to stop by. As usual, I greeted them politely. "Welcome to the stream." At first, the person responded with a simple greeting, but soon after, their comments started getting weird. They began with small criticisms, mocking my gameplay, and constantly making sarcastic remarks about my skills. I tried to stay calm, thinking it was just a young player looking for attention. However, things took a darker turn when their comments shifted from playful jabs to more serious threats. The viewers started saying things like, "I know where you live, and I'll be seeing you soon." At first, I didn't take it seriously. It's common for online trolls to try and scare people like that. But then something strange happened. The person began using my real name, not just my account name. I was shocked. "How do you know my name?" I asked, trying to stay calm despite the growing sense of unease. The person immediately replied with both my first and last name, and that truly shocked me. My real name wasn't anywhere on Twitch, and I had never shared personal information with any viewers. A sense of discomfort and anxiety crept in. This wasn't just a joke anymore. It felt much more serious. I told Zach, who regularly watched my streams, about what was happening. He thought it might just be one of our friends pulling a prank. But after we asked around in our group, no one admitted to it. This only made me feel more confused and unsettled. After a bit of back and forth, the mysterious viewers suddenly left the stream. I thought it was over, that the strange encounter had ended, but I was wrong. The next night, as I returned to my regular stream, the mysterious viewer showed up again. This time, instead of direct threats, they simply wrote, "I'm getting closer." The message sent chills down my spine, but I tried to stay calm and not show any fear. I told Zach, and we continued playing as if nothing had happened. But then another message appeared. "I'm standing at your front door." I immediately ripped off my headphones and stood up, fear creeping over me. I walked to the living room window and carefully peeked through the curtain. Outside, under the faint glow of the streetlight, I saw a man standing at my front door. He was dressed in black, with a hood pulled up over his head, hiding any identifying features. He stood completely still, staring directly at my front door. I didn't know what to do. I certainly wasn't going to open the door, but I couldn't ignore this terrifying presence either. I turned back to my computer and asked through the stream, "Who are you? What do you want?" There was no response. Instead, the man outside began knocking harder. The sound echoed through the house, making me feel like I was trapped in a nightmare. I quickly called Zach and told him what was happening. He urged me not to open the door and to try to call the police immediately. The knocking continued, but this time it was louder, as if he was trying to break the door down. My heart raced, and I quickly left my computer, sprinting upstairs to lock myself in my bedroom. I grabbed my phone and called 911, telling the police that a man was trying to break into my house. While I waited, I heard footsteps downstairs. I didn't dare go outside. I just listened through the locked door. After what felt like an eternity, about 10 long minutes, I heard the distant sound of police sirens. The footsteps stopped, and I heard the front door open. The police had arrived just in time. When I stepped outside, the police were already checking around the house and found no one. The mysterious man had vanished. The only evidence left behind were long scratch marks on the front door, confirming that he had indeed tried to break in. I couldn't explain what had happened, and after that, I decided to take a long break from streaming. No one knew who that man was, and he never returned. To this day, I still don't know who he was or how he found out my name and address. I moved away from that house, but every time I think back to that night, I still feel a chill run down my spine. Sometimes, in the virtual world, you never know who might be watching you.